So today's going to be just a really casual conversation as one patient to another. I've got some exciting news to share about the Migraine World Summit, and you may have heard something about it. You may have seen something on Facebook. You may have even attended last year or the year before. What it is now is an annual event, and it's the largest event in the world for patients, for people who have migraine and their carers. And it's designed by patients for patients. And this year it's going to be running for 9 days from March 20th to March 28th. And for the first 8 days of those of the summit, we'll have 4 expert speakers each day of the event. Now, these talks are available for 24 hours, and you can watch them in any order throughout the day for that 24-hour period. And then the next day's talks will run. And I'll talk a little bit more about the Migraine World Summit. The other thing I would just add about the Migraine World Summit is that the speakers and the topics are absolutely incredible. These really are the world leaders in the field of headache and migraine. We have some of the experts from the top hospitals in the world, including the Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, Johns Hopkins. We have some of the best universities that are represented in Harvard and Stanford. We have researchers from the International Headache Society, the American Headache Society, the American Academy of Neurology, the European Headache Federation. These are the experts that are teaching the headache specialists how to manage their patients. So they're the very top and the very top echelon in their profession. And it's not just doctors that we have. We also have experts in other areas like sleep and exercise. And we also have patient advocates and experts on stigma and employment and in your rights at work. So it's a very cross-functional, multidisciplinary event where there's something for everyone, no matter how migraine affects you or what severity affects you and whether you're a carer or a patient. But I'll come back to that in more detail in a little bit, in a couple of minutes from now. So let me, I guess, first introduce myself in a little bit more detail. So my name is Carl Cincinnato. You probably notice I have a bit of a funny accent, and that's because I'm from Australia, and I was a relatively healthy, young individual. I was fit and in great shape, and I was playing football, and I had a shoulder injury playing football. And before that time, this was in my mid-20s when I had this injury. Before that time, I had migraine before. I'd had migraine maybe 5 times in my life. I'd had it maybe once or twice at school, once or twice at college. And I remember in primary school, I had one attack where I felt really sick in the stomach. That was up until I had this shoulder injury. The shoulder injury I had sort of tore 3 ligaments in my shoulder, which went sort of up to my neck and then to the back of my head, which is where the pain processing region, the occipital sort of pain processing region of the brain. And that kind of spiraled me into more frequent and more severe attacks. And over the course of, say, 2 years, I went from maybe 1 migraine attack every 2 years to a point where I was now having up to 6 migraine attacks per week. So chronic migraine. At the same time, I was spending a fortune on doctors and specialists and sparing no expense, and wasn't getting a whole lot of results. And so I went outside of traditional medicine and went to alternative therapies, complementary health. I saw a physio, chiro, optometrist, behavioral optometrists. I had a whole bunch of different tests, like an MRI, a blood test. I went to an Ayurveda traditional medicine practice, which is like an ancient Indian medicine. And I was really desperate and hoping that one of them would be able to help me. And I remember that when you get to the point where you've spent $6,000 on your own health in a year within Australia, there's tax implications that my tax agent was telling me about. And we had crossed that threshold during that year in terms of just how much I was spending on treatments, on doctors, and my migraines were just as bad as ever. And it was horrible. And the breaking point really came when I went on a holiday with my girlfriend at the time, who's now who's now my wife, who I'm eternally grateful for, who stuck with me throughout it. We went on a holiday to the north of Australia, to Queensland, and we were away for 7 days, and I had a migraine attack every single day. Every single day I had a severe attack where I had to go into my room, I had to disappear for 3 hours, and for the rest of the time where I wasn't sort of sleeping or in that pain, I was just groggy, I was in pain, I still had the headache and debilitating symptoms and pain in my body. And the holiday was absolutely brilliant. It was probably the worst holiday I've ever, well, it was the worst holiday I've ever had. And that really kind of, doing that to my partner at the time, seeing the impact it had on a holiday, not just within work, really kind of made me realize that what I was doing was not working, and that I really needed to take a front step in my own condition, because these doctors, these experts, so-called experts at the time, were not helping me in any material way. And so I went on a sort of a learning journey. I kept a diary, a daily diary, formed a habit of keeping it every day, keeping a record, doing the diary at the same time every day, looking at all the main triggers that might be playing a role. I researched what the triggers were. I was reading the science and the medical papers, and I was starting to reach out to experts. And that's really where the Migraine World Summit was born from, was getting access to this information that was so critical. And fortunately, within a relatively short period of time, I was able to turn around my own chronic migraine condition, and had an amazing transformation. But in the process of doing that, I realized that there were millions of other people who still suffered, who were still trapped in that dark room with chronic migraine. And it wasn't their fault. Migraine is one of those conditions that's complex, it's multifactorial, and there's no cure. And it's one of those things that tests you in almost every single way. It tests you physically with the pain and the debilitating symptoms, the loss of balance, the light sensitivity. It tests you psychologically, because just when you're hit with a migraine attack, that's when you're most likely to receive skepticism from your colleagues or from family or from loved ones. It's like getting kicked when you're down. It's the last thing you need. And then your test when you recover, because you have to catch up on everything you've missed. You've got to keep going like nothing happened. And to everyone else who can't see necessarily the physical symptoms of the attack, it's an invisible disease. So it really is not just physically, but also psychologically a torment. It's almost, I've called it before, it's almost like a perfectly evil disease. And it's not easy to come to terms with. But the turning point for me was really when I took things into my own hands. I took my own health and what I was doing and the doctors I was seeing, and I started to take more initiative in the conversations that I was having with these experts and try to make it more of a partnership by working with the doctors rather than being the victim of this terrible disease and having them throw the answer, the magic bullet, which was never going to arrive. So that was really the turning point. And then when I realized that there were so many other people suffering, and when I also realized that there was something like 85,000 patients per headache specialist, I knew that there was something that had to be done. If the chances are that the average person is not going to ever see a headache specialist in their lifetime. There are just too many people with headache and with migraine. So what are we to do? Like, we don't have a medical degree. How are we supposed to learn all of this? And that's where the Migraine World Summit came in. And so in its first year, we started off, it was a very simple event. I interviewed a bunch of doctors from all over the world, and we had around 10,000 participants, which was fantastic. And if you fast forward 4 years on, there's been over 130 interviews now with these experts. We're interviewing the world's best in the field of headache and migraine, as well as other sort of experts from different areas and subspecialties that affect people with migraine. And we now have over 100,000 people that are participating this year. So that's kind of been a little bit of my story and a little bit about how the Migraine World Summit has gotten started. So the Migraine World Summit this year. So I mentioned a little bit about what this summit is. It's an online virtual event. So you can attend from the comfort of your own home, from your living room. You don't have to travel anywhere. It's been very intentionally designed that way by patients because we know that travel is a trigger, jet lag is a trigger, processed food when you're traveling is a trigger, the lights, the sounds, the announcement at train stations or planes and airports and the lights there are horrible. It's almost a perfect storm of triggers when you're traveling. So one of the best things we've done is just make it a virtual event that you can attend from your home. It starts on March 20, goes till March 28th. There'll be 4 talks each day, and then on the last day, Paula and myself, the co-host of the Migraine World Summit, will do a recap, and we'll talk about some of the highlights that we had and answer more questions from the audience. And I think last time we ended up staying an extra 2 hours just to make sure that we answered everyone's question, so that no one left the talk without having their question answered and no one was left behind. So that's the virtual Migraine World Summit. The way to join the Migraine World Summit is very simple. Just go to migraineworldsummit.com. We can put a link in the comments there so you can see it. And when you go to the migraineworldsummit.com, you click on the blue register button after putting in your email and the password, and that will register you for the event. Registration is required because what happens is you get a special access to the pages where the talks will be held, and that is given to you each day in your personal email. You'll get a personal link to those talks. So you just want to make sure that you're getting our emails and that each day at 9 a.m. Eastern time, you receive our email to watch that next day's talks. Now, if you're watching this from overseas or from another time zone, that's perfectly fine. The talks will stay open for 24 hours, no matter what time zone you're in. It just starts from that 9 a.m. Eastern time. So that'll be 6 a.m. Pacific time if you're on the West Coast of the US, for example. Let me know if that doesn't make sense. So 24 hours later, at 6 a.m. Eastern, at 9 a.m. Eastern, the talks will change over to the next day. And likewise, at 6 a.m. Eastern, it will do the same as well. And so that's kind of how it works. The other thing I wanted to tell you about, which I'm super excited about, is for the first time this year, we have an in-person live event for the Migraine World Summit. This is a kickoff event, and normally we've done this in the past, but it's been a webinar. So this year, we're actually having an in-person event where you can attend physically in person at UCLA. It's going to be at the Luskin Conference Center at UCLA in the Grand Ballroom. We've already had 500 people RSVP. There's still room for a few more. So if you're quick, you can book a ticket. You can find that event from migraineworldsummit.com, or you can go directly there by going to migraineworldsummit.com/MWS live. So exactly the same URL with just MWS live at the back of it. That event is going to be a spectacular event. Not only will there be 500 migraine patients there, which will probably make it one of the biggest gatherings of patients anywhere in the world that we're aware of, but we're also going to have an expert panel on stage live, and we'll have 2 celebrities there. These are celebrities that have migraine themselves, and up until recently haven't really talked publicly about it. They're going to share their stories about how migraine affects them, what they've done, and what living with migraine is like for them as well. So the 2 celebrities are Christian Chenoweth and Terrell Davis. So Christian Chenoweth is a Broadway star. She's won an Emmy and a Tony Award. She's quite well known, particularly if you're a fan of the stage. And Terrell Davis is an NFL quarterback, and he is also in the NFL Hall of Fame, and he played in the Super Bowl in the early, maybe sort of 15, 20 years ago now. And he had a migraine attack during the Super Bowl game. So these are 2 celebrities that will be at the event in person, where you'll be able to ask questions and get answers from them as well. So that's part of the event, along with the expert panel. We'll also have food. There'll be drinks supplied, and you'll also get a sneak preview of the summit as well. So if you are in the LA area, I would encourage you to tune into that. If you're not in the LA area, but you still want to tune in, you can do so. There'll also be a Facebook Live just like this, live streaming the event. So that's another option for you. You can visit the Migraine World Summit page on Facebook or on our website, and you can get the details for that. So that's a summary of the Migraine World Summit, some of my background, and then I wanted to also just share a bit of a landscape view of what's happening in the world of migraine and advocacy, because I know that when I was really struggling with migraine myself, I kind of like was wondering, how is it possible that there's so few doctors? Why is it that only 1 out of 20 people with chronic migraine actually get a diagnosis, an accurate diagnosis, and a minimally effective treatment that's guideline recommended? So these kind of things you would think are pretty standard within the field of medicine, that you get an accurate treatment and an appropriate treatment and an accurate diagnosis. But the reality is, and we've seen this in research, that only 1 out of 20 people with chronic migraine are accurately diagnosed and receive a minimally effective guideline recommended treatment from the doctor. And so there's a lot of work that has to happen behind the scenes, and it involves, to a large extent, us as patients, to create change. And so some of the things that have been happening have been relatively grassroots in the past. But if you're a fan of the American Migraine Foundation, like I am, and shorthand AMF, you'll be familiar with their Move Against Migraine campaign, which is a huge public awareness campaign for migraine. And that's been a huge campaign that's been running for 2 years now and has built a huge amount of momentum. At the same time, there's been a coalition formed in the US where some of the greatest organizations, charities, foundations, bloggers, and advocates have joined. I think there's around 20 to 30 members of this organization. The coalition is called CHAMP, which stands for the Coalition of Headache and Migraine Patients. And that's an organization that has now several working groups targeting different things like communications, like stigma, like changing legislation, providing access for patients, providing guides for patients as well. And that I have never seen such momentum built around headache advocacy as I've seen with the likes of what CHAMP has been doing within North America. And equally so, there's also an organization in Europe called the European Migraine and Headache Alliance, where that's another alliance, very similar to a coalition, but it's an alliance of European-based headache organizations, primarily nonprofits and charities and foundations, to share best practices, to get together on a regular basis and prioritize what are the key issues that patients are facing and how can we move the needle forward to reduce the burden of migraine globally. And I'm really excited about what's going to be happening later this year. It will be the International Headache Society Conference. And at that conference, it will be the first time where CHAMP, the US coalition, and Europe, the European Migraine and Headache Alliance, will be getting together and sharing best practices, introducing each other, and coordinating at a global level things that we can be doing to help people, to help the lives of people with migraine. We know there's a lot of work that has to be done. The progress could always be faster. It's one of the more challenging things, I think, when you work in advocacy, is that from the outside in, it kind of baffles you about how slow things move. But often when we're dealing with the heavily regulated medical sector or the political environment and legislation, the pace is glacial. But the important thing is that we sustain our efforts, that we're consistent and gradually make inroads. And that's what's been happening. And we've never had such momentum as we have today. So that's something that I am really excited about. The other thing I'm really excited about, and I'm going to wrap up soon, so get your questions ready. But the other thing I'm really excited about is the treatments that are coming out, the innovation that's happening in this field. There has never been, and I guess there's never a good time to have migraine, but if there was ever a time in the history of the world to have migraine, that time is now, because there's for the first time, there is a specific medicinal treatment designed to treat chronic migraine. We've never had that. We've had certain treatments that were used in other disease states. There's beta blockers, there's antidepressants, there's blood pressure medications, there's procedures and injections that were all designed for other treatments or other uses, and they just happen to work by happenstance for migraine. But now we actually have something that's designed for migraine, and we have not just one wave of these treatments coming out. There's not just one treatment, there's a whole class of treatments coming out. You may have heard of the CGRPs, the calcitonin gene-related peptides, these monoclonal antibodies that target receptors and molecules that are known to be involved in the cascade of a migraine attack. That's one example of a whole class of treatments coming out. And the best thing about it is that's just one class, but there are more classes of treatments that are on its way. So even if you don't respond to any of these new treatments that are coming out that you may have heard about, there's another wave coming after that, and a wave after that wave. So there's a whole new pipeline full of treatments, devices, and options that if you haven't responded to anything, that there's hope for in the past. So that's another thing that I'm really excited about. So one final comment. So if you cannot attend the Migraine World Summit, if you're away, if you're working, if you're overseas and you're not able to attend, you can still get access to all the talks if you're not able to attend in person or during that period. And that's by ordering a copy of the summit. So when you order a copy of the summit, we donate 50% of the proceeds back to migraine charities, nonprofits, and groups. And so one of the most, for me, one of the most important things that we do is donate back into the community to support organizations like the American Migraine Foundation or Headache Australia, or in the UK, the Migraine Trust. We've donated over $20,000 back to these organizations to reinvest into research, into patient support, into helplines, into information, so that we can all grow as a community, and we can all do and all have a bigger impact in that field. So that's one of the things that is an option for those people, but it's absolutely optional. The vast majority of people will attend for free, and we're very happy to provide that service for everyone. But if you want to get a copy delivered to your home, that's absolutely an option as well. So that's the Migraine World Summit. That's kind of the lay of the land from an advocacy perspective. I've given you a little bit of background about myself. So I'm very happy to answer questions. If you have any questions about